Yes, I'm finally here, and it's finally time to review the Fantastic Four. Fantastic Four came out a couple weeks ago, and I can't say that I'm upset that I missed it. Right? I wanted to go see it opening night. I did, but am I happy that I didn't? Yeah. I would say that watching it later definitely was the move. Um, I am not upset or mad at the movie, right? It was a good movie for all intents and purposes, but for a superhero movie, it was very lackluster, right? It was very much so foreplay, right? It was very much the introduction to the Fantastic Four so that they could be featured in Doomsday without a hitch, right? It barely did anything. The couple of action sequences that happened were over in a flash. They necessarily weren't even all that entertaining. The most entertaining one wasn't even a fight, but it was an interaction between the Silver Surfer and the Human Torch. And it's sad that that was the most climactic, I guess, point of the movie for me. Don't get me wrong, though. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed the Fantastic Four. Now, when I call it the Fantastic Four play, it is very much because, like I said, they were just trying to get the Fantastic Four introduced into the MCU so that they had the characters for the Doomsday movie coming out. The movie opens up, and it is very quick to introduce you to the Fantastic Four. I'm happy that they didn't take a long time to build up the story of the Fantastic Four. You know, they gave some respect to the audience and letting us know, hey, we know that you know the Fantastic Four, right? We don't need to do the space story. We can just do a slight little read over, and you know that's it. That's how they got their powers, etc., etc. And from that point, it becomes this super. Long doesn't feel like the word because it's only 114 minutes runtime, but it feels stretched out. Like it feels not even rushed as much as it feels like there wasn't a lot of care put into it. It felt more like a family drama and not a superhero movie. So I can kind of understand where the reviews are coming from where it tried too hard to be a superhero movie. Because in my opinion, it really did try too hard to be a superhero movie. It didn't come out of the gate like a Batman or a Spider-Man or an Iron Man and show you that these guys are actively defending the city. They fought a total of, you can call it two, but they didn't even really fight the Silver Surfer as much as they convinced the Silver Surfer to help them. Spoiler alert, I don't know if you knew, but yeah, I'm going to be breaking down the movie. So, overall, it felt like there was no care, right? It felt like they wanted to just not necessarily rush the film out. You know, I don't necessarily know how long production took on this movie, but it was very lackluster for the experience I was expecting. Right. Now, you can say that about all Marvel movies. Wow, let me talk. You can say that about all Marvel movies as of recently, but there have been a couple to which I enjoyed in the past years, right? And this one feels kind of like Marvel started to go down the Star Wars route, right? Just put something out for the fans while they're making their next big thing. You know what I mean? It was very much so subpar fan service. They did the characters right, in my opinion. I loved the costumes. I loved the character models. I loved everything about the movie except for the plot line and the story, right? I feel like they could have done so much more for the almost 2 hours that I spent watching this movie. it felt as though everything they did in this episode, or I guess in this movie, could have been fit into an episode. You know what I mean? It could have been fit into a 45, 50-minute long opening Fantastic Four TV show, right? It didn't necessarily need to be a movie. Now, while I want a Fantastic Four movie, yes, I do. I wanted one. But for them to come out and basically bore me to death until the last 30 minutes of the movie, including credits, because partly one of the most interesting things was a post-scene credit where Franklin Reed is talking to Doom, right? That was the most interesting part, and it kind of plays into what I'm saying with it being Fantastic Foreplay. Because I know this is a dead horse I'm beating right now, but it just feels like they didn't care. You know, they could have done so much more with what they had, right? I remember the first Fantastic Four movie that I saw. I thoroughly loved it, although it may not have been the best. You know, it was still early 2000s and movie magic hadn't really become movie magic yet. It was still, in my opinion, a more enjoyable Fantastic Four experience. Now, when you're comparing the movies side by side, yes, the newest Fantastic Four, The First Steps, is a better movie, right? But if you were to compare the storylines, I would have to pick the very first one that came out in like 2002 to 2008, somewhere in there. You know, whenever that first movie came out. It leaves me wanting more. And granted, while for a corporation that could be a good feeling for its consumers to feel, you know, like they're going to release Doomsday and Secret Wars and all of those movies, and you know, it makes me want to see how these things are going to be resolved. But it's the fact that they wasted my time for as long as they did. Right. Silver Surfer was great. You know, I don't necessarily understand why people complaining that she's female, because, you know, it's comic book canon. Just overall, I'm having a hard time processing my thoughts about it because I don't feel like really anything happened. It became a big SpongeBob meme. We're going to take it from here and move it over there. You know, like, that plan from the beginning honestly could have been scrapped, right? Sure, would have been cool to watch Reed Richard teleport the entire Earth to another space-time location, but I also feel like that would have tore a black hole in the universe and now everybody's dead. You know, and for them to force Galactus, this all-knowing god creature, basically, into a teleportal onto the other side of the universe, it just feels lame, right? I really hope Galactus has a bigger role coming up in the MCU universe, because his character design was on point. It was great. It was almost flawless, right? I would have loved him to have a little bit more screen time. His interaction with Lady Liberty was a nice little touch. You know, he kind of just looked over his shoulder and was like, all right, let's do this. And he started, like, you know, looking for Franklin. But to have the main problem of the movie be discussed more than being solved, right? It just feels like they solved this so fast compared to how long they spent hyping up the fact that he's going to come eat the planet, right? It was very just disappointing. I think that's just the general word of how I feel about this movie. It was like having sex for the first time. You know, everybody wanted to finish earlier than usual because it was just bad. And that's honestly all I have to say for it. Now, that isn't to say that I'm not excited for Secret Wars and Doomsday, right? I'm excited to see how they incorporate RDJ back into the MCU. I don't think he should have been casted as Doom, but I can understand from a comic book lore accurate explanation where RDJ was adopted by the Starks and not necessarily meant to become a Stark. So, like, his original purpose was to be Doom. So it kind of makes sense that, the multiverse is open and, we have another alternate timeline coming to raise hell as RDJ's Doom. Right, that makes sense. It's cool, but I would have liked to see some different people get some of this Marvel Cinematic Universe action. You know what I mean? I would like to see different faces. Because every time I look at Doom in the new movie, I'm just going to see Iron Man. I'm just going to see Tony Stark because RDJ did such a good job with it. But honestly, that's about all I have to say for it. This has been The Kevin Show. Like, subscribe. I'm going to try to be releasing videos on a weekly basis. Well, on a daily basis, not weekly basis. But so be on the lookout for that. But until then, have a good one. Thanks for watching. And as always, goodbye.